In his 30 years as a journalist, Keith Olbermann has never been at a lack for words, and he's never been reluctant to tell you what he truly believes. Well, now he has a book out. It's a collection of his commentaries. It is called Trump is Effing Crazy. This is not a joke. We began our conversation last night with Keith about the book and why he decided to put these commentaries together. We continue our conversation with him now. I am very curious, and I've asked a number of political observers this same question, and that is, when we first start hearing about Donald Trump running for president, what did you think his plan really was at that time? I guess the better question, do you think he really wanted to be president? Or was there something else going on?
I think he had that same emotion that every one of us has ever had in this country. I'd like to get elected president. Now, serving and being
do I
president,
want to really do the job?
99.9% of Americans go, oh, hell no. I want no part of that, because you see before and after pictures of all presidents, whether they're there for 8 years or 4, or it is, why do we elect them to kill them as quickly as possible in terms of how quickly we wear them down? I think he doesn't have that monitor that says, don't do this, you're going to actually have the job. All the jokes that he makes, those few jokes that he makes, are about, oh, do I have to come back next year, or I'm going to take more time, or what? I don't know that he wanted to be president. I think if you now sort of back engineer everything he's done in office, those few things that actually have applied to policy, something really infuriated him about Obama being elected instead of him. I think that's the way he saw it, and I think that animated this. So when I saw him come down that escalator, I thought, this is serious. And I don't know what the end game is. I don't know if it's simply a publicity stunt, but it won't matter, because there's something about the way he approached that television show which made no sense to me whatsoever. And people who liked that show loved that show. There's a connective factor that he has, and an indefatigability, which I also give him credit for. And those are the principles on which you could start a demagoguery school if you wanted to, and my suggestion is he did. So I mean, what we knew, what we didn't know, I took it seriously.
And you started actually with these commentaries before the election.
Oh yeah, no, we started them at GQ in September of 2016, but I started to do Trump pieces and some videos for other outlets back in March.
Did you actually have any suspicions that he indeed may well be elected president of the United States back when you first started doing this?
Well, he's the nominee. Thus, there is always the chance of the election. It was, as many people said, with Sarah Palin's nomination as vice president in 2008, well, look, she's going to just crash John McCain. Well, what if she doesn't? What if she's vice president? You must take that possibility seriously. I don't think anybody would argue that Hillary Clinton was the greatest candidate of all time. She has said she would have been far better in the job than in the interview. There were a series of perfect storms that seemed to be coming together. And the thing that I noticed early in 2016 was that as he neared the nomination, even late 2015, we are now stuck in most news media, particularly in television, in this, well, you've got 3 people here who say he's absolutely out of his mind and it might as well be a fascist dictator or an invader from another country. Therefore, we have to have 3 other people on who disagree, and they're all going to be there together simultaneously while someone nods gravely and then throws to break. And we are so married now on television in particular to the idea of balance, and it's a false god to my mind, and the objectivity is another false god, that the system, both in terms of journalism and even the democracy, is no longer sharp-edged enough to put down the equivalent of an internal revolution. All the things that we thought and grew up and watched and knew nothing like this could happen here were not strong enough to withstand somebody who would simply say, I'm not playing by any of these rules, and by the way, none of them are actually in law. You only think they're law, they're actually just custom. So this was the thing that I saw coming, and I don't claim to have predicted he was going to win, but I thought it was going to be much closer than most people did, and there were, in fact, another series of perfect storms on Election Day that allowed this to happen, and they were perceivable. And to me, the best use of my time last year was to try to, sort of say, hey, they take it seriously, and here's what you need to take seriously. And the first piece we ever did was 176 reasons he shouldn't have been president.
The Republican Party has actually nominated for president a man who attacked the Pope. who attacked John McCain for being captured by the North Vietnamese, who attacked Gold Star parents Khizr and Ghazala Khan and then juxtaposed their names with the phrase radical Islamic terrorism, who attacked Hillary Clinton as a, quote, bigot, who attacked her as brainwashed, as unhinged, as a monster, as the devil, as the most corrupt candidate ever. The Republican Party has actually nominated for president an irresponsible, unrealistic, naive, petulant, childish, vindictive, prejudiced, bigoted, racist, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, misogynistic, fascistic, authoritarian, insensitive, erratic, disturbed, irrational, inhuman individual named Donald John Trump. This is madness.
With all of that you've laid out, 176 reasons why he shouldn't be president, many of which have disqualified other people, and we've sort of marveled at that as we look back on this election. If you came across a person who says to you, look, I was a Trump supporter.
Right.
And you know what? Everything you say in that 176 reasons is absolutely accurate and true and correct. But I voted for him anyway.
Right.
Because I don't care about the man. I just care about what he said he would do for us and lower our taxes. And, you know, I'm a business person and I want to, maybe I'm a big business. I want to bring my money back from abroad. All of the things that he's talked about. And that person says to you, you're right. Absolutely right. I don't care. How do you answer that person? Because there are a lot of those people around there.
Well, but my point to them has always been the same. He has sold out everybody at some point. He will sell you out. And many of the reason that those firm supporters, very enthusiastic about his presidency, why those numbers continue to tank and don't get the attention of the flat disapproval approval number, is people realizing, my God, I've been conned. That's what he does. That's the whole premise of it. That's how he succeeded, because he convinced everybody there in a manner that hasn't been seen, I think, in American politics since FDR. He was able to say, you're the only person in this country I'm talking to. FDR did it with fireside chats. Right. He did it with Twitter.
Bill Clinton had a way of doing that.
But
he would come into a room,
yes,
and he'd walk out of the room, and you know that. You walk out saying, I'm his new best friend.
It's so many politicians go into a room and you go, that's the only person in the room. The brilliant ones will then be able to say, you'll come away with that feeling that you're the only person in that room. But now with Twitter, you don't read Twitter in a group of 25 people or a crowd. You're reading it directly. If I tweet something, somebody reads it, and it is the conversation back is not, oh, did you see what Keith Olbermann said? It is addressed to me as if I am only talking to the recipient. So he has managed to use, as FDR did, a state-of-the-art change in media to get past the established media, which was the point of the fireside chats, started as Franklin Roosevelt as governor of New York trying to get past a conservative legislature and drum up support from the radio audience.
So do an end run around the legislature, exactly. And I'm going to take advantage of this new technology, the radio.
Exactly. So my point to those supporters is, yeah, this is the thing. Every contract, everything he ever has paid for, he's paid 85 to 90% of, because he knows you'd have to sue him for the other 10%, and that would cost you more than the other 10% would. So my point to all of them has always been, yeah, but it's eventually going to be your turn. What do you think you're going to get out of this long term? And the point is that the people who are supporting him, and I mean that in those in power, can be summarized by an operative, a veteran political operative who worked with him on his campaign throughout. And I was sitting doing a panel discussion on another television program, and my argument, and this is September of last year, my argument was he was not stable enough to be president of the United States. I said, not to put too fine a point on it, but I think he's crazy. And we can figure out what that means and how crazy he is and what the diagnosis is. I'm not a professional, I can't tell you what, but I know crazy when I see it. And I mean, you should meet my family. I know enough crazy people. But my point was repeating this one premise. And at the end of it, once the cameras were off, this guy who's been in the political business for 60 years turned to me and goes, by the way, you're right. He is crazy, but he's going to get us into power. And that's an awful state of affairs for the country. I don't mean to make light of it, but that's why Paul Ryan says, well, what are you going to do? And these characters coming out of the woodwork to run for office in the Republican Party who want to make homosexuality illegal or not let Keith Ellison be sworn in Congress because he's a Muslim. In a past time, the entirety of the political media complex would engulf them like the white blood cells in your bloodstream go after a germ.
Why not now? Why is it different?
The money, I suspect that's at the root of it. If there's that much money is required for you to get a House seat, you're not ever going to have people who can afford to do it on their own. I mean, even in my youth, I know people who were elected to Congress and didn't spend $100,000 on the campaign. That's not the case anymore. We're moving into multi-million dollars and we'll be, beyond that shortly just for a seat in the House. And with that much money and that much power behind it comes perks and an incessant need to be reelected in a constant state of getting those people most likely to vote, who are always the most enthusiastic, always the most zealous. And they're going to be the ones who want to change laws and to restrict behavior, or to be fair to both sides, the people who are likeliest to vote against the demagogue are ones with special interests of their own. And I would probably tend to agree with them. But that's where we are now. When you think of the percentages of who voted, who didn't vote, how many votes Trump got, we're still dealing with an election in which the total vote is a minority number in the country. There's so many people for whom this doesn't matter to this day, or who voted in November last year.
Concerned enough to take a few moments to go to their local place and pull a lever.
Well, but even the ones who did, we're in the middle of this, and if you remind yourself that you're in to some degree a bubble because you're politically active, or you're covering politics, or you're in politics, that's usually healthy enough so that you don't neglect the people who do not spend 24 hours a day doing it. But I do think we tend to lose the idea that most voters are not going to spend, they're not having a meeting every week to decide who they're going to vote for. They'll decide that day. If they don't already intrinsically and intuitively know who they're going to vote for, the ones who are undecided would decide in the week beforehand and spend 5-10 minutes on it. And that's all it's worth to them, because they don't perceive it in their own lives as being important. And I think if there's anything positive coming out of this, I'm hoping that people will realize how important this is.
Let me come back to what you mentioned before, and that's your characterization of Donald Trump as being crazy.
Yep.
Right? Now, clearly, and as I said in the introduction, you have always been provocative and thoughtful in your comments, your commentaries, your approach to things. I can say that having worked with you and been a guest on your show. Yeah. So you've never shied away from that if you genuinely believed it. My question is this. You're talking about the President of the United States.
Yeah.
And we often hear people say, all right, I might not like the occupant, but we need to have a certain degree of respect for the office.
Yes.
Does that then, in any way, concern you about saying, you're not saying he's idiosyncratic,
No.
You're not saying he's odd,
No.
he's quirky,
No.
You're saying he's clinically
It's
crazy.
something clinical.
Yeah. Is there a part of you that says maybe I shouldn't be characterizing the President of the United States that way?
Well, there's two answers to that. One is we did put the star over one of the letters in the middle word, so it's not the full. We did back off. We did tone it down a little bit. Not all the commentaries have this, are not predicated on this, and to some degree,
Right, and they're not. I want to make it clear to
yeah.
people. It's not all that. It's a lot of different looks at different issues.
Also, I did address my opinion of his mental health as long ago as November 2015. So it is, to some degree, he's the one who decided to be president. It's not my fault that this man who I called crazy is now the crazy president, as opposed to the crazy ex-TV star or whatever you would have described him as a year and a half ago. The issue of the respect for the office pains me bitterly each time I have to address it. But I think this is part of the problem. We're all of us who are critics of him, or even those who aren't sure, or those who are reporting on him, are maintaining all of our political and journalistic traditions. We're staying within the forms of what we have always done, particularly in political news, where, as you'll know, you and I both work in both sports and politics. In sports, you go to any game and you think something will likely happen here that I've never seen before. Even if it's just a sequence of events that I've never seen before.
You almost hope it will happen.
Right, but I'm ready for that. It's the Tim McCarver baseball philosophy. You will go to a game, you will see something you have never seen before, he said, and I've been to 30,000 games. All right, fair enough. In politics, it's the reverse. We want to narrow everything down back into a formula that we can understand because we have certain procedures and rules, and this is, well, maybe this is like Lyndon Johnson after his gallbladder surgery in 1965, or when Woodrow Wilson had his stroke and then didn't perceive that he'd had a stroke. These are unprecedented things. And if the forms of politics and government and being president are to be torn down by the president, I don't think it's beholden on the rest of us to play by the rules. If he has taken the rules and said, screw this, I'm going to do what I want, which I think everybody who hates him and everybody who loves him would agree is a good description of this. Screw this, I'm going to do whatever I want. If that's the case, we have to, those of us who are assessing him and criticizing him and supporting him, I think, are entitled to follow his rules here. And I'm not proud of saying that I think the President of the United States is not, his brain doesn't work right. I'm not proud of that. I wish it weren't the case. But the idea that I can't say it because he's president is, to me, a little, it's sweet in a way. It's God bless America, and it's Mr. Smith goes to Washington, but that's not where we are at the moment. To me, we're in desperate trouble in the same kind of way we would be if some other country had invaded ours and installed a president, called him president. Do we have to respect him the way we respected the last presidents who got elected? I don't think so. And of course, there are undertones of the possibility that that might be partially true, that scenario that I just described relative to Russia anyway.
Well, we could take hours to do this. Unfortunately, we're limited somewhat in our conversation.
Also, we all spend hours talking about this anyway every day.
But you and I have to talk more than every 20 years.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
It's nice to get together. Again, it's called Trump is effing crazy. This is not a joke. And it's a very thought-provoking collection of your commentaries. And we appreciate your spending some time with us. We'll get you back sometime soon and talk some more.
My pleasure. I live in the neighborhood.
All right, good. You be well.